Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. We have some bowl games in the books. There's a snuff film going on in Miami Gardens, Florida right now. We just decided to get going. I don't know that any of you want to watch the rest of this. Jesse Simonton joins me. And Jesse, that was sort of what we expected in the Orange Bowl, but worse?
Yeah, I mean, I expected a splattering, but the fact that, Georgia's third stringers are putting it on Florida State's quote-unquote first stringers, which are really their second and third stringers as well. There's going to be a ton of takeaways, and I think a ton of hot takes and a ton of, honestly, Andy, terrible takes coming out of this game. But I think my biggest takeaway is having nothing to do with Florida State and their opt-outs and all that. It's that, the playoff the four teams in the playoff are probably pretty fortunate that Georgia's not in it, because I think it's clear that they probably are one of the best four teams. They did not win the game that they needed to, which was in Atlanta. But it speaks volumes of what Kirby Smart has gotten these guys to buy in for, that not only the backups, I mean, Gunnar Stockton and these third stringers, the five-star freshmen, it's not a surprise that they want to, get their shine and make plays here in the second half. But it's that Cedric Van Pran played in this game, Ladd McConkey, Kamar Lassiter, Javon Bullard, these guys that are going to go pro. And they only had to play a half because Georgia was beating the hell out of them so badly. But they clearly did want to buy in and send a message today that said, hey, doesn't matter who's on the other side or who isn't on the other side. We still think we're one of the best four teams. And I think that's probably the statement coming out of this, that in a 12-team field, a team like Georgia's, you just don't – it's just going to be really hard to beat them, in an extended playoff.
So here's the thing. A lot of people were watching, especially the first half. I think a lot of people turned it off by the second half, but we're saying, oh, this is proof the committee got it right. Was it? I mean, should Georgia have been in there?
Right. I agree. I mean, again, I think there's going to be a ton of awful takes out of this game from the Florida State vantage point. And I joked in a column earlier this week that I said, I think Mike Norvell will be completely justified if in his post-game press conference he kind of pulled a Dan Mullen. And Mullen got lampooned for it 3 years ago. But I think in this case, it's completely correct that the Florida State team that we knew, the 2023 Florida State team that we knew, played its last game 3 weeks ago against Louisville.
And the difference in those two situations is Florida lost the SEC championship game in 2020, and then people made decisions to opt out. Florida State had something happen to them that was completely out of their control. They won the game, then they didn't get in the playoff, and I don't blame any of those people for opting out. I don't blame anybody for not wanting to be a part of this game. I mean, if I'm Florida State, I'm just saying this whole thing was a farce and doesn't matter. And you can say that's an excuse. It absolutely is. But in this case, it feels like a justified one. But the scary part with Georgia, Jesse, is especially with their backups. And this is the part I was worried about. Like when we were talking about the line being 19 and a half, I was like, that's so many points. But I still am going to take the Georgia to cover here. Georgia's backups are fighting for starting jobs next year, especially along the offensive line. Like they have a bunch of job openings next year. Like they weren't going to come out and half-ass it in this game. That was the problem, is even when those starters sat down, those backups want to prove a point.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned the offensive line, and that's certainly a good starting point. Running back, they got several freshman running back who are going to be pushed by Trevor Etienne and some of the other guys they're bringing in next season. You have all these outside linebackers, these 5 stars that have been backing up the likes of Mykel Williams and some other guys. They get to play a ton today. Cornerback Harris is one of the guys that allegedly was going to be in the portal, and I think he probably got to play 60 snaps. So it's just kind of crazy. I think the only person that didn't get in the game today for Georgia, Andy, which again, it was one of the statements that they wanted to make, was their punter, who's been jokingly tweeting about transferring all offseason because they keep landing studs out of the transfer portal. I think Brendan Thorson was the only guy that didn't get to play today because they emptied out the bench early and often. And again, no matter what the takeaway is from the Florida State vantage point, the fact that Georgia did come into this game and said, hey, we want to make a statement, we're hungry. They certainly did that by hanging, a 60-plus burger again in a big game. The game was an exhibition last year's
Yep.
national championship against TCU when you and I were together at the coaches convention watching and splattering. That was not an exhibition, but a similar beatdown. This one doesn't mean quite as much, but I think it is. We did at least get a tease of maybe the future of Georgia's offense in Lawson Lucky, Delp getting an expanded role.
I love Delp trying to hit the hurdle on the first catch, and then thinking about it real hard on his second one too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of talent there, and I do think, going back to your earlier point, we're going to have to look at this differently going into next season because the dynamics are going to change. Like a team like Georgia, which would not be in line to get a bye because they were not a conference champion, like Georgia. Okay, here's my question. We talked about the CFP, and we've got the graphic up about how it worked out. Georgia was the 6th seed, would have had to play Ole Miss in Athens, which they actually beat Ole Miss in Athens earlier in the season. I think Georgia would have been the 5 seed in a 12-team playoff. I think Georgia would have been ranked ahead of FSU in a 12-team playoff.
I don't disagree with that at all. And again, the joking thing of did the committee get it right? You and I literally made that very point after the quote unquote shocking news with Florida State getting left out when we did the instant reaction show, which is, it seems odd to justify in your logic that Florida State was the 5th seed and that Georgia was somehow the 6th seed when almost everyone would say, no, like, okay, I get it. The games matter, yada, yada, yada. Yes, but there's no way that Georgia's not one of these best 4 teams. And I think that's played out today. In a 12-team field, they would be super scary. I believe you're wholeheartedly correct. They would be the 5th seed. We would not get a rematch of the Ole Miss game. And they would, you'd probably face the worst group of 5.
They get essentially, it's not a bye, but they get the easiest game because they get the highest ranked group of 5 champ. This year it's Liberty. We don't know who it's going to be next year, but that's who they get. And then they'd roll into a 4-5 matchup in a quarterfinal that they'd probably be heavily favored in.
Yeah. The idea, and you know what? They would probably be heavily favored, Andy, if next season, because obviously their schedule.
If it was Alabama again,
right? But hypothetically, they're going to have a tougher schedule next year. They got at Ole Miss, you play at Alabama, at Texas. You play Clemson to open the season. What if Georgia's 10-2? Well, they'll still probably get in at 10-2, and they're still probably going to be one of the scariest, if not the scariest teams, just because of their depth, potential, and upside.
Yeah, I think you look at that SEC schedule for next year. I don't know that anybody's coming out of there undefeated. I'm not sure anybody's coming out of there 11-1. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. Now, the SEC champ's going to get a bye. Even if it's a 2-loss SEC champ, they'll get a bye because you're probably not going to put some other conference champ, or 4 other conference champs above them. I think people are just they will adjust their expectations. Because
no, go ahead. Because I think you're leading us right down the perfect road, which is everybody, the media, but especially fans are going to have to adjust the expectations. I don't think we're going to see an undefeated team quite often moving forward.
No,
this is going to become more of
in
the Big Ten either. This is going to become, whether we like it or not, this is going to become more like the NFL, where there's quote unquote more parity. Now, it's not going to be a 6-loss whatever team winning the Super Bowl.
You're not
like
going to have the Giants from that one year.
Right, exactly. But you're going to have a lot of 11-1 and 10-2 teams that get into the college football playoff and then go on a run from there.
Which is fine because there's a lot of randomness during a season, and especially because of the way the conferences are designed, the schedules aren't apples to apples. So that's fine with me. Let's talk about some of these other New Year's 6 games, because I think there's 2 teams in there that would have made the college football playoff. Well, all of these teams would have made a 12-team playoff. But how excited would you be to see Missouri and Ole Miss moving forward out of the first round? Because I think those 2 would scare some people.
They would, and Missouri's going to have to reload coming out of this game. But this season, obviously, with Cody Schrader, he kind of helped propel them to beat. That was an ugly game against Ohio State. for much of the game last night. I think, what was it, 8 punts or 9 punts to start the game, and
but Missouri's defense was great,
oh
and they were
yeah,
playing without Tyron Hopper and without Ennis Rakestraw. So I was very impressed with the way Missouri just held on until they could keep pounding and wear down Ohio State's defense. And Ohio State played without Eichenberg, but they were not defensively. They were mostly full strength. I would say both of them were missing a couple of key pieces, but had most of what they needed. And Devin Brown going down early certainly was a problem for Ohio State. But yeah, I would be very excited about Missouri going forward. They got Williams Nwaneri, the number one defensive tackle recruit in the country, or defensive line recruit in the country. And I think this is going to be a very good program going forward. I think Eli Drinkwitz has got some things figured out, the way the state NIL laws work, like make it possible for them to keep some of their best players in state. So I was very impressed with Missouri. Ohio State, I am way more worried about Ohio State now than I was coming out of the Michigan game.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess first point on Missouri. I think Eli's done a nice job not only using his state NIL, but with the state laws for the NIL, but he's brought in some guys from the portal that I think are going to be plug and play dudes. I mean, getting Oklahoma, arguably Oklahoma's best offensive lineman, or most highest upside returning offensive lineman. They're going to have 2 guys that go pro that are going to be top 50 picks this next year. But to get Green out of the portal is huge. They get a potential starter, I believe, in Georgia State. Their running back who had over 1,000 yards. That he's going to be kind of the guy to replace Schrader. And then you're bringing back your quarterback and Cook and having a guy like Luther Burden. They're going to be quite interesting. The other side, I mean, Ohio State's entering this offseason with just a whirlwind of questions, because JTT and Sawyer were awesome in that game. So you're going to lose both your edge guys. You're going to lose some key guys in the secondary. And suddenly it seems appropriate that they have been so aggressive in the transfer portal, recruiting and courting Will Howard, because Devin Brown, we don't know if he ain't it, but we know he hasn't stayed healthy. And
I would have loved to see a full game from him. Like, I was hoping he'd have that Miller Moss moment. Like we saw Miller Moss. We can talk about some of the other bowl games later, but we saw Miller Moss in the Holiday Bowl for USC, and you're watching him and going, "Are you sure you need to get a starter out of the portal? Because you think you may have your guy." Yeah, and I was hoping Devin Brown would have that game, but he never got a chance to. And honestly, the way Missouri's defense is playing, I don't know if he would have.
Yeah. And, I think it's important to remind everyone, Andy, that these bowl games are largely meaningless, except if you want to decide they're not, and you want to have and you want to have a take for your own personal agenda. So I was impressed. I was impressed with Missouri's defense. They're going to have to replace Hopper, though, and they're going to have to replace some of those defensive linemen. So can they sustain? I think that's one of the biggest things for both them and Ole Miss. Can you sustain? Now, Ole Miss is bringing back even more. Obviously, what they've done in the portal is even more impressive. Their Lane's effectively recruited an entire new starting 11 on defense, and then bringing in Juice Wells to play wide receiver opposite of Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins. So Ole Miss is going to be the buzziest team of the offseason.
Right. But I think Missouri is going to have some buzz too. And look, the SEC is going to get 3 or 4 teams in to the playoff, and we just don't know who they're going to be. And
wouldn't you put that over under at 4?
I would put it at 4. I think 4 is a good number and I think 4 is probably a good number for the Big Ten as well. I mean,
with Notre Dame maybe being a wild card.
Yes, but Ohio State, like the way they played the last 2 games, especially this past game. And I know they were shorthanded. I know you can question motivation after everything that happened. Obviously, Missouri is more excited about being in a Cotton Bowl than Ohio State would be. I don't care. Like the problems Ohio State has had are stuff that moves beyond motivation for a bowl game. Like, it feels systemic. They are not what they were under Urban Meyer. They're a different team. They're not scaring people in the Big Ten the way they used to. They're certainly not scaring Michigan at all anymore. And I've been around Michigan the past few days. Ohio State, they don't even, it's so crazy because Ohio State was this specter that hung over them all year, every year. And they don't even think about them anymore. And Ohio State's got to get this figured out.
Yeah. I know they were without Marvin Harrison and they were without Fleming too, but
it used to be
Travion Henderson 3 years ago looked like he was going to be an All-American and like a Bijan Robinson first round pick. And he just hasn't been. I know he's battled a slew of injuries, but when he's played, he's just kind of lacked some juice. That's just been, it's something's missing. And there just seems to, I think you're right. I don't think maybe it's something we can explore this offseason, but something is missing from that team. Yeah. And that's a concern.
I thought the offensive line didn't look good most of the season.
That's a concern when the Big Ten's about to get even more competitive and you're bringing in a team like Oregon that's recruiting as well or better than you. Washington, Kalen DeBoer just wins everywhere.
And Washington always has dudes on the D-line. They've always got some freakish like Danny Shelton or Vita Vea in the middle, Greg Gaines, and then like ZTF and Braylon Trice on this team on the edge. Like they always have guys. USC is going to have good athletes. UCLA is going to have good. Look, UCLA always has had good edge rushers for the last seemingly 6 years. So this is the part that Ohio State has got to get fixed and fix it now. Otherwise, they could fall behind.
Yeah. And this is, this has not been, it's not been a bannered last 24 hours for the Big Ten with Ohio State's performance, and then Penn State obviously getting waxed pretty good, but by Kiffin and Dart there.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about Ole Miss and Penn State. Lane Kiffin retweeting fake Penn State fan accounts that were actually members of the Ole Miss staff. Google that if you haven't heard about it. But one of the offensive staffers at Ole Miss changed his Twitter handle to make it look like he was a Penn State fan, and then said, "Hey, they're going to go at." I forget which.
They're talking smack about their offensive linemen at the.
Yeah, there were a couple of particular Ole Miss offensive linemen. Yeah. And so it was so funny, and Kiffin admitted it afterward. But that Penn State was shorthanded on defense. Again, not an excuse. Like, you gave up 38 points. And Ole Miss has looked really good as this whole season has gone on. And you just talked about what they picked up in the portal. Now, they got Walter Nolan. They got Tyler Barron. They got Prince Louis Manmielen. These are D linemen that normally a team might get one type of that guy in the portal. These are three difference makers on the D line that they've added. And then, oh, by the way, Juice Wells, who might have been one of the best receivers in the SEC had he not been hurt most of the season at South Carolina. So Ole Miss, I think we're going to be talking about Ole Miss as a preseason top 5 type team.
Yeah, you also get Arkansas's best linebacker. You get Indiana's top safety, Illinois' top cornerback. I mean, they have Mississippi State's Camryn Robinson, their top cornerback. They're going to be a factor. The fact that they have gotten so many good players to also return. Quinshon Judkins, the quarterback, Dart. You get Ivy back. That's another pass rusher.
Yep.
JJ Paguglia is also coming back. I think the key next season, Andy, is honestly it's can Lane get over the hump in terms of winning games he maybe isn't supposed to.
Can you beat Georgia?
Yeah. Do you can you beat an Alabama? Do you beat a Georgia? We've seen him beat Texas A&M. We've seen him beat LSU. But for them to kind of get to take that next step as a program, now they certainly have taken the step. Obviously, they won 11 games for the first time in school history this year. But to do something they've never done before, which is either get to the SEC championship game or compete for it, and then make a college football playoff. That's kind of the next challenge.
So we got a question from Jeff. He says, "Do you see bowls being part of the playoff system after the initial contract runs out? Should be a 2026 season and beyond. I don't think the CFP needs them. So what is the future of bowls?" I agree with Jeff on this. I actually think the event would be better if everything's on campus until the championship game. I think the games would be better. The crowds would be better. Asking people to travel 3 times is stupid. I don't think you should do that. But the Bulls are going to fight for their survival. They're going to fight for their place in the game. And I think they'll probably manage to, in this contract, keep themselves in it. And then eventually it'll cycle out. But, I don't think they're meaningless. Like, that bothers me when people say that Bulls are meaningless. I don't think the Bulls should control the sport. But I've loved some of these games, Jesse. Like, I really enjoyed the Alamo Bowl. Really enjoyed the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Let's talk about the Pop-Tarts Bowl while we're at it. I mean, this game was awesome. First of all, it was K-State, NC State. Now, NC State's
Hello,
missing
Avery Johnson.
Its best player, but we're so excited to see Avery Johnson play, a 5-star homegrown freshman, quarterback, savior of the program kind of guy. And I really enjoyed the hell out of that game. Now, I thought the Pop-Tarts people did an amazing job. That's how if you're going to be a bowl game and you're going to use it to sell stuff, do it like that. That's the fun way to do
it. That was awesome. The Duke's Mayo Bowl embraced a similar sort of ethos. I mean,
everybody's copying. Everybody's copying the Duke's Mayo Bowl now.
Exactly. Embrace the fact that this is supposed to be silly. Yes, these games are exhibition games, but they can be silly. They can be fun. I thought the Gator Bowl was probably the bowl game thus far.
It was great. It was so much fun.
That fourth quarter was just like you watch those. I'm sure your kids have seen them too. Those Olympic ping pong videos where those guys are just smashing it back and forth, and that's what that was. That was just two teams going back and forth. Clemson basically the last team with the ball.
I know,
17 yards. That was an awesome game.
Dabo once again advising us to buy stock in Clemson, and I'm not here to criticize his investment advice, but when your defense is giving that many points to this Kentucky offense, I'm a little concerned about your buy rating. I don't know. You may be a hold or a sell, but that was a great win for them. And, Phil Maffa's been great all season. So I love that one. The Holiday Bowl was fun to watch because it's interesting that the USC players who are left, like USC has been easy to root against since Lincoln Riley got there. But you couldn't root against that group of players who'd been through a lot this season, who they were the ones that stuck around and played. And they're basically half the team. And they went out and beat Louisville and looked great doing it.
Yeah, I mean, Miller Moss out there throwing. And you know what? That's one of those cases that, now Taj Washington had a huge game.
Yeah. By the way, Taj Washington, who's going into the draft, novel concept. If you play great in a game on national TV, it might help your draft stock. The NFL scouts might like that.
He played really well, and he led the team in receiving. He had like 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. But the rest of those guys that Moss was throwing to were all these freshmen that he's been playing with on the scout team or on the as the backups, and you get to showcase that rapport and that chemistry. And suddenly USC fans are like, hey, well, we got these 5-star and 4-star wide receiver freshmen. Didn't get to play a whole lot this year. We kind of like what we get. We kind of like what we're seeing. And I think you've seen that similarly in other bowl games. I'm with you. There's a lot of folks already out there opining, to either cancel the bowls or make them, the first game of the season. I am not. I have never been an advocate of let's make it the week 0 bowl game deal. I think a lot of coaches would not be in favor of that. I don't think that's going to solve a lot. I don't think
the coaches still want these as an extra spring practice. The problem is that all the transfer portal stuff is happening at the same time. All the coach movement is happening at the same time. And everybody's like, well, there's got to be a solution. There's no solution to the calendar because you'd have to change the idea of having semesters in college.
Right.
And guess what? The business of college is always going to be bigger than the business of college sports. So they're not going to change how they divide the college calendar for this.
Yeah. No, I do think they're going to. I think because it's going to be untenable, Andy, I think there will be changes to the calendar here in the near future. because not this time, but 2 weeks ago when the portal was really on fire, that's when these teams would have been preparing for the first week of the 12-team college football
Right,
playoff.
right.
So I think that eventually there will be some sort of adjustment, however slight or not.
Yeah. You may push it a few weeks or constrict the window where you can enter the portal, which would probably be fine for most of the coaches. Maybe put it after the early signing day, and that way you could at least get your arms around a little more. And if you're in the play, that's the other thing, is if you're in the playoff, who's portaling? Like this Georgia team's a good example. Like they would have been in the 12-team playoff. Would all of those guys who have portaled for Georgia, and most of those are guys who were not going to play or start next year. Some of them were going to play, but we're not going to start next year. Like, would they have portaled, or would they have waited it out until after the season?
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. But we certainly have gotten an audition. I mean, the Avery Johnson audition was fun. The Jackson Arnold, little less fun for Jackson Arnold.
He looked like a true freshman at times, but man, the thing is though, there were some throws and some plays where you go, I see why they're so excited. So, I think that's one of those things where we're going to see that. And then Monday we got Nico starting for Tennessee against Iowa. I think everybody's pretty pumped to see that. I don't know that I would want to make my first start against Iowa's defense, but I'm pretty excited about it.
I'll have an early prediction for that one, Andy. There's going to be some rash takeaways from that. No matter how.
No
if he does well, Tennessee fans are going to think that it is kind of that he is the Pied Piper. And if he struggles badly, they're going to be I think there's going to be some overreactions there. Either way, it's one game. It's the first game, and like you said, it's against Phil Parker. And that defense. So I know Cooper DeJean isn't playing, but they still have a lot of really good guys on that side.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing, we haven't mentioned the 4-team playoff teams yet, really. And we're not going to in this episode. We've got a whole preview show for the semifinal games that'll come out tomorrow. So I'll be talking a lot of Alabama, Michigan, a lot of Texas, Washington with Richard Johnson from Sports Illustrated. We've got Alabama player interviews. We've got Michigan player interviews. But this other part of this, the other piece with the teams that are not in the playoff, that are in the playoff, is still exciting. It's still fun. And I just have thoroughly enjoyed this week. I love this week every year, Jesse, where you've got wall-to-wall football all day. I know, so a lot of people have to work, but a lot of people do sync up their vacations with their kids' winter breaks, and so you get some afternoon football, and that's the part that's fun to me is you get some of these days where you get banger after banger after, like that Gator Bowl to kick off Friday was a blast.
Well, that game was awesome, and I did not. But here's another game. I mean, this was one that'll get buried because of the New Year's Six games and the other stuff. But, Maryland, they kind of killed their season, just completely housing the Tigers. And then, this is one of the things where, okay, what is the win-loss? What does it mean? But it's certainly interesting when, after the game, Hugh Freeze is out here talking about him not having really anything to do with the game plan or offensive script because he's been so busy recruiting. And it's like, signing day ended.
You shouldn't say that.
Signing day ended well over a week ago. There, that's kind of strange. And there's another one. Auburn, you've signed all these 5-star receivers. Quarterback play continues to be a concern, and yet they have seemingly not really kicked the tires on many options out of the portal.
Well, I felt like they gave the vote of confidence to Peyton Thorne as the 2024 guy, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they were waiting for this game to happen, and then they could say, see, we do need to go get somebody out of the portal. Maybe that's what it is. But I will say for Maryland, speaking of the portal, you just had a really fun way to end your season. You've also got MJ Morris coming. MJ Morris pretty damn good. Yeah,
and we'll see it. Their ex-quarterback who did not play in this game, Talia, is looking to find a waiver to allow him to play a sixth season in college football next season. So
just set more records.
The new reality.
It's been strange. I feel like even though the rules were pretty much the same last year, this has been much more strange because I think everybody was just sort of getting used to it last year. It's settling in that this is the reality now, at least for this year. Next year, it all changes again. Question. So we started the show talking about Florida State and Georgia. Next year, let's say this situation had happened again. Florida State was left out, but they were the 5 seed, and they got the 12, and they play a Liberty type team, and then they wound up playing a Georgia type team. So maybe it would be Alabama, and in the second one, who's playing for Florida State? Are we seeing everybody except Jordan Travis?
I would think so. I mean, I don't know why not. I mean, because most of these guys, I think all the other guys are healthy. I know Keon Coleman's a little banged up, but, you know, Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Verse, those guys would all be playing. You would have, Brent Fisk would be playing. Farmer would be playing. So I would imagine that they would have the lion's share of their team. But that doesn't mean that it would obviously not have been 63-3 or anything close to like that. But the quarterback is the most important position for a reason. And, they struggled mightily against the Louisville defense that got waxed by USC, and we're not doing the transitive property thing here, but it's just the committee, quote unquote, got it right in terms of what the 4 teams are for the competitiveness of what we're going to see on Monday. But that doesn't mean at the same time that FSU didn't get hosed. And that doesn't mean at the same time, Andy, that maybe their response was less than thus, because you have 3 weeks to prepare and your whole team shuts it down. And this is what happens. You lose 63-3.
Yeah. And Skylar in the chat, by the way, I think she's making fun of Miami, saying that they lost to Rutgers. But let's praise the Scarlet Knights because they put it on Miami. That's another one that was fun to watch, a program that's been through a lot of crap get to have that moment in the sun.
Yeah, but that was one of those, you talk about a lot of folks are not working on Twitter, hanging out. A lot of folks were having the, schadenfreude of enjoying another Cristobal in-game, clock management disaster, because it's the man knows how to recruit 5 stars and screw up timeouts, because it's a yearly tradition.
Well, we gotta ask the most important question that this bowl season has posed to us, Jesse, before we sign off. What is the best flavor of Pop-Tart?
Well, I know you're team blueberry, right?
It's frosted blueberry, baby. It's the finest flavor there is.
Frosted blueberry. I was a big I liked frosted blueberry. I was a big frosted strawberry. And then
frosted strawberry is a good change of pace.
I do think people have completely slept on just the frosted brown cinnamon sugar.
That's my son's favorite. I actually had a couple of those the other day.
It's a classic.
Yeah, it's that one you kind of have to be. I like the tartness of the blueberry or the strawberry or the cherry if you can get your hands on those. But when you want it more as a snack or dessert, not as breakfast, I think you go to the brown sugar cinnamon.
Did you? We're at times this show is sponsored by FanDuel, correct?
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I love FanDuel.
FanDuel.com/Staples.
Yeah, get your bonus code. Not sure about their Pop-Tart. Did you see what they tweeted out as the best Pop-Tart though?
No. Oh.
S'mores.
Okay, we may have to have a talk with our friends at FanDuel.
Not
one that I would have in my top 5, but
no.
Listen, we do appreciate their business, and we do appreciate the ability to get these lines on these games. I felt pretty good about. So how my picks usually go. They're not great, but 3-0 so far in the New Year's 6 and CFP. So I got Liberty, Oregon, and the 2 semis to go.
Maybe they chose s'mores because they're big into the parlays. They like to smash the chocolate with the marshmallow. Yeah, a lot of things at once.
I think you're right about that, Jesse. Well, listen, I'm still going to be toasting my frosted blueberry. To each their own. They're all wonderful. And Pop-Tarts is the best bowl sponsor in the history of bowl sponsors, except for, of course, Poulan Weed Eater. And Just imagine what would have been dumped on the coaches in those days.
Well,
if
it's
that's
way
what they
better
did.
than it's way better than all your crazy, armed forces where
Oh, the
we're
Bell
basically,
helicopters.
yeah, where we're like sponsoring the Blackhawks and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you can dump a bucket of helicopters on somebody, but that's neither here nor there. Jesse, it's been a pleasure, and we will see you again after the Sugar Bowl on Monday night.
I can't
We
wait.
will know who's
It's gonna
playing
be
for the national title.
Should be. I think we're gonna have two bangers.
I agree. Come back Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Rose Bowl time. We'll get you ready for both of those semifinals. Thank you so much for watching.